I sacrificed everything for my parents only to discover the heartbreaking name they saved me as in their phone, so I finally cut them off. My name's Martin, and this is my story. My parents, Jackie and Leonard Thompson, had all successful careers, a beautiful house in the suburbs and a plan. A plan that involved having a daughter, their precious heir. Instead they got me. I remember the day I realized I wasn't the child they'd hoped for. I was 5 playing with my action figures in the living room when I overheard my dad on the phone. "Yes, it's true. We're having a girl." His voice was filled with an excitement I'd never heard before. "Oh, you have no idea how long we've waited for this. Finally, a daughter." Those words cut deep. I didn't fully understand then, but I felt it. The sting of being second best, unwanted. Things changed quickly after that. Dad's belly grew bigger and so did the distance between us. Mom was always working, and when she was home, all the talk was about the baby girl on the way. One day Dad called me into the kitchen. "Martin, sweetie, we need to talk." I climbed onto a chair, my legs dangling. "What is it, Daddy?" He didn't look at me as he spoke. "You're going to stay with Grandpa for a while. Isn't that exciting? Mommy and Daddy need to prepare for the baby. You'll have more fun with Grandpa anyway." And just like that, I was packed off to Grandpa's house. Grandpa Roger was Mom's dad, a retired English literature professor. He lived in a cozy little house filled with books and the smell of freshly baked cookies. Living with Grandpa was different. He actually paid attention to me, listened when I talked, and didn't seem bothered by my presence. We'd spend hours reading together, and he'd tell me stories about when he was a teacher. For the first time in my life, I felt loved, truly loved. 2 years flew by. I was 7 when Mom showed up at Grandpa's doorstep. "It's time to come home, Martin," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Your sister needs you." Sister. The word felt foreign. As we drove home, Mom filled the silence with awkward small talk. "Your sister's name is Emily. She's 1 now. You're a big brother now, Martin. That's a big responsibility." I nodded, not really understanding what that meant. Little did I know my childhood was about to end. We pulled into the driveway of our house. It looked the same, but it felt different. Dad was waiting at the door, a toddler on his hip. "Martin, meet your sister Emily," he said, his voice oddly formal. I looked at the chubby-faced girl with curly blonde hair. She gurgled and reached out a pudgy hand towards me. "Hi Emily," I said softly. And just like that, at 7 years old, I became more than a brother. I became a caretaker, a responsibility, a built-in babysitter. My childhood slipped away, replaced by dirty diapers, constant vigilance, and the weight of expectations I was too young to bear. While my classmates were playing with action figures and learning to ride bikes, I was changing diapers and warming bottles. "Martin, can you watch Emily while I make a call?" Dad would say, not really asking. I'd nod, already reaching for my little sister. It wasn't that I didn't love Emily. I did, fiercely. Her toothless grin and grabby little hands had won me over from day one. But the constant responsibility was overwhelming. Days blurred together in a haze of school, chores, and babysitting. I was exhausted, struggling to keep up with my homework while making sure Emily was safe and happy. But no matter how hard I tried, it never seemed to be enough. One fateful day, I took Emily to the park. She was 2 now, full of energy and curiosity. I turned my back for just a second to tie my shoelace, and in that moment, disaster struck. "Martin!" Emily's cry pierced the air, followed by a thud. I whirled around to see her sprawled on the ground, her knee bleeding. Panic seized me as I scooped her up, trying to soothe her wails. When we got home, Dad exploded. "How could you be so careless?" he shouted, cradling Emily. "You're supposed to watch her." "I'm sorry. I just no excuses." Mom chimed in, her face red with anger. "Go to your room. We'll discuss your punishment later." I fled upstairs, tears streaming down my face. It wasn't fair. I was doing my best, but I was just a kid myself. The incidents piled up. Emily burning her tongue on hot porridge because I didn't blow on it enough. A bump on her head from a fall I couldn't prevent. Each time the punishments got harsher. The disappointment in my parents' eyes more evident. Through it all, Grandpa Roger was my lifeline. He'd visit when he could, his presence a balm to my battered spirit. During one visit, I overheard him confronting my parents in the kitchen. "This is unacceptable." Grandpa's usually gentle voice was sharp. "Martin is a child, not a nanny. Your favoritism towards Emily is hurting him." "Father, please." Mom sighed. "These are our children. We know what's best for them." "Do you?" Grandpa challenged. "Because from where I'm standing, you're neglecting one child in favor of the other." "That's enough," Dad cut in. "We appreciate your concern, but this is our family. We'll raise our children as we see fit." I threw myself into my studies. School became my sanctuary. A place where I could shine on my own merits, and shine I did. My grades were a silent rebellion against the notion that I wasn't good enough. The years flew by, and before I knew it, I was standing at a crossroads. High school was behind me, and college loomed ahead. Despite the constant struggle at home, I'd managed to excel in my studies. It was my ticket out, my chance at freedom. When the acceptance letter arrived, I could hardly believe my eyes. Not only had I been accepted to study investment management, but I'd also received a full scholarship. My hand shook as I read the words over and over again. "Mom, Dad," I called out racing down the stairs. I got in full scholarship. "Oh, thank goodness," Dad sighed, relief evident in his voice. "That saves us a fortune. We need to start saving for Emily's college fund." My heart sank. Of course. It wasn't about my achievement. It was about the money they wouldn't have to spend on me. The first few months were a whirlwind of classes, new friends, and the exhilarating taste of freedom. The money from my parents combined with the small amounts Grandpa Roger secretly sent was just enough to scrape by. I was careful with every penny, knowing how precious this lifeline was. But 6 months into my college journey, everything changed again. My phone rang one evening as I was studying for a finance exam. "Martin," Dad's voice came through, curt and businesslike. "We won't be sending you any more money. Emily needs tutors if she's going to have any chance at college. We need to focus our resources on her now." I felt the familiar sting of rejection, of being cast aside. "But Dad, I can barely. You're an adult now, Martin." He cut me off. "You need to solve your own problems. We can't keep supporting you forever." The next few weeks were a blur of stress and sleepless nights. I scoured job boards, applied to every position I could find. Finally, I landed a part-time gig at a nearby cafe. The hours were long, the pay was meager, but it was something. Balancing work and studies was brutal. I'd rush from classes to shifts, then stay up late into the night studying. Dark circles became a permanent fixture under my eyes, and my grades started to slip. One particularly rough day, I called Grandpa Roger, desperate for a friendly voice. "Martin, sweetheart, you sound exhausted," he said, concern evident in his voice. "The dam broke." Through tears, I told him everything. The cut-off allowance, the grueling work hours, the struggle to keep up with my studies, those absolute. Grandpa cut himself off, taking a deep breath. "Listen to me, Martin. You focus on your studies. I'm increasing your monthly allowance and don't you dare argue with me about it." "But Grandpa, no buts," he said firmly. "You deserve this education and you shouldn't have to kill yourself working to get it. Your parents, well, let's just say I'll be having words with them." True to his word, Grandpa's support allowed me to cut back my work hours. I could breathe again, focus on my classes. My grades improved. And for the first time in months, I felt hope. The years at college flew by in a blur of textbooks, exams, and late-night study sessions. Before I knew it, I was standing on the stage, diploma in hand, magna cum laude, gleaming on the certificate. As I scanned the audience, I spotted Grandpa Roger beaming with pride. My parents and Emily were noticeably absent. With my degree in hand, doors opened. I landed a job at Stonebridge Investments, a prestigious firm in the city. The salary was more money than I'd ever seen, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly independent. To save money, I moved in with Sam, a co-worker who became a fast friend. Our tiny apartment was a far cry from the dorms, but it was ours and it felt like freedom. When my first paycheck arrived, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with it. I scoured every second-hand bookstore in the city until I found it. A rare first edition of Grandpa's favorite author. The following weekend, I took a train to my hometown, gift in hand. Grandpa's face lit up when he saw me at his door. "Martin, what a wonderful surprise." I presented him with the wrapped book, watching his tears welled in his eyes when he opened it. "Oh, my dear boy," he whispered, hugging me tight. "You shouldn't have." "I wanted to," I said simply. "You've done so much for me, Grandpa." As we chatted over tea, I mentioned visiting my parents. Grandpa's face tightened slightly, but he nodded. "I'm sure they'd love to see you." But when I called, Dad's voice was distant. "Oh, this weekend? We're quite busy, Martin. Perhaps another time." The rejection stung, but I pushed it aside. I spent the weekend with Grandpa instead, relishing his warmth and genuine interest in my life. As I boarded the train back to the city on Sunday, I couldn't help but feel a mix of sadness and relief. Time marched on. 2 years passed in the blink of an eye and my career soared. My bosses praised my work ethic and insight, and the bonuses started rolling in. Soon I was able to afford my own apartment, a small sun-filled space that was all mine. One evening as I was settling in for a quiet night, my phone rang. Dad's name flashed on the screen. "Martin," he said without preamble. "These teachers, they just don't understand Emily. They're giving her such poor grades. She barely scraped into City College." I bit my lip, choosing my words carefully. "Dad, maybe college isn't the right path for everyone. There are great vocational courses Emily could." "Don't be stupid," he snapped. "Your sister is brilliant, much smarter than you actually. She's just misunderstood. She'll show everyone, you'll see." As I hung up, I gazed around my apartment, the tangible proof of my success. Yet somehow, I still felt like that little boy desperately seeking approval. Life has a funny way of upending expectations. While I was building my career brick by careful brick, Emily's college experience was crumbling around her. It was a crisp autumn day when Dad called again, his voice tight with frustration. "Emily's been expelled," he said without preamble. "She's coming home." He launched into a tirade about unfair professors and a system designed to fail students like Emily. I listened, biting my tongue against the urge to point out the thousands they'd spent on her education, the loans they'd taken out to rent her a luxury apartment, the generous allowance they'd provided, all things I'd never had. "We'll figure something out," Dad concluded. "Emily just needs time to find her path." I thought about Emily, now 21, returning to our childhood home while I at 27 was forging ahead in my career. The contrast was stark, but I pushed the thought aside. Comparison is the thief of joy after all. Life, however, had other plans for me. It was at a company event that I met Jamie, tall, kind-eyed, with a quick wit that made me laugh like I hadn't in years. Our whirlwind romance swept me off my feet, and before I knew it, we were standing in a small chapel exchanging vows in front of a handful of loved ones. Grandpa Roger was there, of course, beaming with pride. My parents attended too, though their smiles seemed a bit forced. Emily didn't come, citing a vague prior commitment. Jamie and I moved into her apartment, a cozy space that quickly became home. Her parents, Tara and Elliot, welcomed me with open arms, their warmth a balm to my soul. A year into our marriage, I found out my wife was pregnant. The joy that filled me was indescribable. When we announced it to our families, Jamie's parents were ecstatic. My parents' reaction was more subdued. "Do you know what it is yet?" Dad asked immediately. I shook my head. "It's too early to tell." As the months passed, their interest in the baby's gender became almost obsessive. When we finally revealed it was a girl, their relief was palpable. "A granddaughter," Mom exclaimed. "That's wonderful news, Martin." I tried not to read too much into their reaction, focusing instead on preparing for our daughter's arrival. Little Alexandra came into the world on a rainy Tuesday. Her tiny hand wrapping around my finger as if to say, "I'm here, Dad. I've got you." As I held her, I vowed to give her all the love and support I'd craved as a child. While I was navigating new fatherhood, Emily continued to drift. She picked up odd jobs here and there, but nothing stuck. She was still living at home, much to our parents' poorly concealed frustration. During a rare family dinner, I tried to broach the subject gently. "You know, Emily, there's an entry-level position opening up at my company. I could put in a good word, Martin." Dad cut me off sharply. "Your sister doesn't need your charity. She's just taking her time to find the right opportunity." Mom nodded in agreement. "You were lucky, Martin. Things just fell into place for you. Not everyone has it so easy." I blinked, stunned. Lucky? The sleepless nights studying, the years of juggling work and school, the constant struggle to prove my worth, none of that felt like luck. But I swallowed my retort, not wanting to start an argument. As I looked around the table at my parents' defensive postures, Emily's sullen expression, and little Alexandra babbling happily in her high chair, I realized something profound. Family isn't just about blood, it's about support, understanding, and unconditional love. And sometimes, the family you choose can fill the gaps left by the one you're born into. As Alexandra's 5th birthday approached, we planned a trip to my hometown, Jamie, our daughter, and me. Our first stop was Grandpa Roger's house. We spent a wonderful afternoon with him. Alexandra captivated by his stories and the old photos he showed her. As we were leaving, Grandpa pulled me aside. "Your parents have been struggling," he said softly. Maybe it's time to let bygones be bygones." The next day we stood on my parents' doorstep. Dad answered, looking older and more tired than I remembered. Mom was in her armchair. Emily slouched on the couch. They both looked up as we entered. After awkward greetings and stilted small talk, Dad cleared his throat. "Martin, we need to talk to you about something." What followed was a halting explanation of their financial troubles, medical bills, Emily's ongoing unemployment, the lingering college debt. It had all piled up. "We hate to ask," Mom said, not meeting my eyes, "but we could use some help." I glanced at Jamie, who gave me a subtle nod. Despite everything, these were my parents. "Of course," I heard myself say, "I can send some money each month." The relief on their faces was palpable. We worked out the details, $1,500 a month, with the understanding that they could reach out if emergencies arose. Over the next 2 years, I faithfully sent the money each month. There were occasional requests for extra help, a broken water heater, unexpected car repairs, which I always obliged. It felt good to be able to help, to maybe, finally, earn their approval. When Thanksgiving rolled around, we found ourselves back in my childhood home. The house was full. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and Grandpa Roger all crowded around the dining table. As we ate, Mom and Dad couldn't stop talking about Emily. "She's been at her new job for 3 months now." Dad beamed. "Such a hard worker," Mom chimed in. Did you see the new sofa cushions? Emily bought those with her first paycheck. So thoughtful of her. I glanced around the room, noting the new curtains, the fresh paint on the walls, the updated appliances in the kitchen, all purchased with the money I'd been sending. But I bit my tongue, not wanting to spoil the mood. Jamie squeezed my hand under the table, a silent show of support. Alexandra, oblivious to the undercurrents, happily chatted with her cousins. The Thanksgiving dinner continued, the chatter of family filling the air. I was just starting to relax when Alexandra tugged at my sleeve. "Dad, can I go play in the other room?" she asked. Her eyes bright with the restlessness of a 5-year-old at a grown-up gathering. I nodded, ruffling her hair. "Sure, sweetie. Just don't make too much noise. Okay?" As Alexandra scampered off, I turned back to the conversation. Barely a minute had passed when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen, confusion furrowing my brow. The caller ID read Dad. I looked up at my father sitting directly across from me at the table. "Dad, why are you calling me?" He frowned, shaking his head. "I'm not calling you, dear. My phone's in the living room." Just then, Alexandra reappeared in the doorway. My father's phone clutched in her small hands. The room fell quiet as all eyes turned to her. "Daddy," she said, her voice ringing in the sudden silence. "I found Grandpa's phone. I wanted to see who he talks to. I saw a funny name, Cash Cow, and clicked on it to see who it would call." "Why did it call you Daddy? What's a cash cow?" The words hit me like a physical blow. Cash cow. Is that all I was to them? I looked around the table. My relatives sat frozen, forks halfway to their mouths. Grandpa Roger's face was a mask of shock and anger. And my parents, they had gone deathly pale. The silence stretched thick and suffocating until something inside me snapped. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Cash cow?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "Is that what I am to you?" My father opened his mouth, but no words came out. My mother couldn't even meet my eyes. "Let me tell you all something," I continued, addressing the whole table. "For the past 2 years, I've been sending my parents $1,500 every month. When they've asked for extra, I've sent that too. All those new things you've been admiring, the curtains, the appliances, the fresh paint, that was all bought with my money." I could feel tears pricking at my eyes, but I blinked them back. I did this despite years of being treated like I was second best, despite being sent away as a child, despite having to work my way through college while Emily got everything handed to her. I did it because I thought maybe finally you'd see me, you'd be proud of me. My voice cracked on the last words, but instead I'm just your cash cow, a source to be milked dry. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Jamie stood up and put her arm around me, a solid presence at my side. Alexandra, not fully understanding but sensing the tension, came and wrapped her arms around my legs. The silence in the room was deafening. I stood there, heart pounding, waiting for my parents to say something, anything, an apology, an explanation, even a denial. But what came next shocked me to my core. My father's face hardened, his eyes flashing with indignation. "Well, of course you help us. We gave birth to you, raised you. It's your duty. Don't be so sensitive about a silly phone contact." I felt as if I'd been slapped. Years of pent-up frustration and hurt bubbled to the surface. "Duty, is that what you think this is? Well, let me make this clear. From this day forward, I'm done. No more money. No more help. I'm cutting ties." At the mention of losing financial support, Dad's demeanor changed instantly. Tears sprang to his eyes. "How can you be so heartless after everything we've done for you?" He looked around the table seeking support from our relatives, but to his surprise and mind, they remained silent. One by one, they looked away from his pleading gaze. Then Grandpa Roger spoke up, his voice quivering with anger. "Heartless? You dare call Martin heartless after how you've treated him? Well, let me tell you something. I want nothing more to do with you either, and you can forget about any inheritance. It's all going to Martin and Alexandra." The room erupted into chaos. Dad was sobbing, Mom was trying to calm him down, and Emily just sat there looking bewildered. In the midst of it all, I felt Jamie's hand on my shoulder grounding me. "I think it's time we left," she said softly. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. We gathered Alexandra in our things, said goodbye to Grandpa Roger and the other relatives, and walked out without another word to my parents. True to my word, I stopped all financial support. The call started almost immediately. First pleading, then angry, then downright abusive. When the messages turned into threats, I warned them that I'd take legal action if they didn't stop. Eventually, the calls and messages trickled to a stop. Life went on. I focused on my career, on Jamie, on raising Alexandra. Grandpa Roger became an even bigger part of our lives, his love and support a balm to the wound left by my parents' betrayal. Years passed. Through the grapevine, I heard that Emily had racked up significant debts. My parents, in a last-ditch effort to bail her out, had to sell their house. The three of them ended up in a small apartment across town. When I heard the news, I was surprised to find that I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, not even anger anymore. They had made their choices just as I had made mine. Today, as I watch Alexandra play in our backyard, Jamie by my side and Grandpa Roger laughing from his favorite chair on the patio, I realized something profound. I finally found my place, my worth, and no one can take that away from me.